For centuries, Earth had been the beating heart of humanity and the central pulse of the Terran Alliance. Its orbit was never still. Cargo ships, diplomatic cruisers, scientific satellites, and private vessels flowed in and out like breath. Space traffic reports buzzed with updates every second. Earth wasn't just a planet. It was a symbol, a living, shining world that echoed with the voice of billions. And then one day, that voice fell silent. No warning, no final message. One moment, Earth's presence hummed through every galactic channel, and the next, it was gone. Comms officers tried to ping relay satellites, no response. Long-range scanners probed the Sol system and returned nothing but static and silence. At first, no one panicked. Earth had suffered outages before. Solar storms, network overloads, even the occasional data filter update that disrupted comms for a few hours. But this was different. Days passed, then a week. The silence deepened until it felt heavy, deliberate. In the heart of the Galactic Council Hall on Corvex, representatives from dozens of species gathered behind sealed doors. Whispers filled the air like dust. Earth had never gone dark. Not even during the Orion Uprising or the AI Accord crisis. Now, there was no word, no signal, not even an automated beacon. Admiral Aros Ven, a veteran of the Joint Defense Fleet and one of the few non-human officers who had trained on Earth, leaned over the council table. Has anyone received a private signal? A restricted transmission? Anything? The silence in the room echoed the one in space. Counselor Mirai, the human ambassador stationed on Corvex, stood at the center of the chamber. Her posture was firm, but her face showed concern. "We received one anomaly," she said. "Not a message, a pulse. 72 hours ago." She activated the table console. A three-dimensional image shimmered into the air, a wave pattern, faint and erratic. It was not language, not data, just a fluctuation, a signature. It originated from Jupiter's orbit, very faint, and then nothing. She paused. It was like Earth exhaled and then held its breath. The council chamber stirred. Some believed it was an accident, perhaps an asteroid strike on key infrastructure. Others whispered that Earth had initiated a secret defense protocol. There were even theories that the Terran government had collapsed, or worse, that humanity had been attacked by something unknown. Yet there was no debris, no distress call, no refugee ships. Earth hadn't been hit. It had vanished from conversation. The trade unions panicked first. Earth controlled hundreds of critical export chains, food, tech, medicine. But all shipments had halted. Civilian colonies with strong Earth ties began requesting updates. Earth's allies started deploying scouts, hoping to re-establish contact. A few even reached the edge of the Sol system, but something was wrong. "Navigation errors," reported one scout ship. "Instruments fail near Mars. Starfields misalign. Gravity distortion around Earth's orbit. Strange energy interference." The Council authorized an official observation mission. A multi-species fleet of unarmed ships departed quietly, keeping their course off public channels. Their mission was clear: enter the Sol system, confirm Earth's status, and return with answers. As the fleet entered the outer edge of the system, everything seemed eerily calm. Jupiter's moons were still in orbit. Saturn's rings shimmered as beautifully as ever. Yet the fleet's scans detected an odd fluctuation, a distortion field near Earth. Not violent, not unstable, but controlled, engineered. The lead vessel, Ares Venture, relayed a short burst. "Approaching Earth. No active defenses, no orbiting satellites. Planet surface is covered. Energy barrier confirmed. Awaiting further..." The message ended abruptly. The rest of the fleet retreated without engaging. No hostile action was recorded. But something had disabled Ares Venture's systems without firing a shot. When the report reached the Galactic Council, the chamber fell silent. They had not just lost communication with Earth. They had lost contact with a world that had built the greatest fleet in human history. A world of thinkers, builders, diplomats, and warriors. A world that now chose silence. And across the galaxy, a quiet, unsettling realization took root. Earth was not gone. It had chosen to be silent. And the galaxy, for the first time in living memory, was afraid of what that meant. The galaxy had lived through many strange events, rogue AI uprisings, dying stars, even the collapse of the Zernic Empire. But never before had Earth gone silent. And now, the silence began to move. Reports trickled in from the outer colonies. Patrol ships at the edge of the Terran sectors began experiencing odd disruptions, navigation errors, distorted sensor readings, and unexplained static on secured channels. Starfields flickered for fractions of a second. Entire sectors briefly dropped off galactic maps, then returned as if nothing had happened. It wasn't widespread, just hints, flickers of something vast shifting beneath the surface of reality. At first, many dismissed it. Local interference, said some. Sensor ghosts, said others. But the pattern kept growing. 3 mining stations near Proxima burned out their long-range systems simultaneously. A science team studying wormhole activity in the Carine Drift received an encrypted burst transmission, unlabeled, untraceable. It simply read, "Stand down, remain outside Sol. Earth is not abandoned, Earth is becoming." Then silence again. Whispers spread through starports and military corridors. Was it a warning, a threat, a message of hope, or something else entirely? Back on Koravex, the Galactic Council convened for an emergency meeting. The chamber was tense. Half the representatives wanted to increase patrols around Earth. The others feared that any provocation might trigger something they didn't understand. Counselor Mirai, humanity's remaining voice among the stars, stood before the assembly. Once more. This time she didn't look worried. She looked steady. "I believe Earth is alive," she said, her voice echoing through the chamber. "Not biologically, but strategically. Something has changed. The silence is not a symptom of collapse, but of preparation." She gestured to a hologram, an overlay of star system activity around Sol. Trade signals had not simply ceased. They had been redirected. Orbital stations hadn't vanished. They had gone dark by design. And most curious of all, Earth's moons were no longer following predictable orbital paths. "They've been adjusted," she said. "Moved slightly, synchronized perhaps for a planetary defense net or something even larger." The room buzzed, with quiet murmurs. Ambassador Chovek of the Anrathi Alliance leaned forward. "Are you saying Earth did this to itself, that humanity chose silence?" "I'm saying," Mirai replied, "this is not the action of a defeated people. It's the calm before something significant." Not long after, a signal arrived. Fragmented. Delayed by a temporal fold. It was discovered by a Terran-built deep listening station on the far edge of the Kepler Divide. A single voice, faint, human. Phase 3 initiated. Secure all outposts. Sol lockdown complete. Non-Terran vessels, hold position. This is not a threat. This is your only warning. There was no aggression in the tone, no fear. It was calm, certain. The message spread like wildfire. Outlying systems increased surveillance. Research teams begged for access to Sol's edge. Pirate groups and mercenaries were seen gathering near abandoned human trade routes, hoping to plunder whatever Earth had left behind. None returned. Yet despite the fear, something else stirred in the hearts of the galaxy's citizens. Curiosity. Earth had always been unpredictable, bold, creative, resilient. If humanity had found something, or built something powerful enough to warrant silence and secrecy, what could it be? And then came the final signal that changed everything. A sleeper satellite in orbit around Neptune, forgotten, decommissioned, untouched for decades, activated. It broadcast only once. A data stream filled with encrypted bursts, impossible to translate fully. but one image flashed clearly before. It self-deleted a view of Earth from orbit, covered in a shimmering field of hexagonal light. Rings of satellites glowed with synchronized pulses. At the poles, colossal structures stood like watchtowers, projecting something deep into space, and behind the planet, just barely visible, a shape moved. Slow. Vast. Not a ship, not a station. Something else. The image ended. And suddenly, the galaxy understood. Earth was not waiting for help. It was preparing for something beyond its borders, something approaching. And whatever it was, Earth had chosen to meet it in silence. Because when the storm finally arrived, humanity intended to speak with action. The diplomatic vessel. Lancer's Grace drifted cautiously toward the Sol system's outer boundary. Aboard were scientists, diplomats, and security officers from 3 different species, all united by a single mission: observe Earth, report back, and do not engage. They were under strict orders not to cross the invisible line, now being referred to as the Sol Silence Perimeter. But the crew couldn't shake the feeling that they had already passed into something unseen. The stars near Pluto twinkled as always, but sensors reported unusual gravitational ripples, tiny distortions, like fabric being gently stretched and released. Communications were clear, but only on a narrow band. All automated systems ran slower here, like they were swimming through water. Commander Aaron Toval, a Lurian born and raised in deep space, stood at the forward viewport, his smooth-scaled, arms folded behind him. "We are being watched," he said softly. Captain Anya Kerr, the Terran-born officer placed in charge of the diplomatic mission, turned her head slightly. "What makes you say that?" Toval didn't answer. He simply pointed. A shape was moving near Neptune, small at first glance, but impossibly fast and perfectly still at the same time. Kerr raised her wrist console. There were no readings, no energy output, no heat signature. "Cloaked?" she asked. "No. Something else. Not hiding. Just quiet." The Lancer's Grace continued its silent drift past Uranus. Then, for the first time, a signal broke through. Not from Earth, but from somewhere in high orbit above it. It wasn't a voice or data stream. It was a tone, a single low-frequency pulse that resonated through the hull. No words, just a feeling. It wasn't threatening. It felt like a doorbell being rung from inside the house. Kerr's communications officer turned. "Captain, I think we've been acknowledged." Above Earth, the ship's long-range optical array zoomed in. Where once the international orbital rings had shimmered with the lights of traffic and trade, now they lay dormant, shrouded in faint light. The ships that once orbited Earth had vanished. But something else had taken their place. Hundreds, perhaps thousands, of small prism-like structures floated in a perfect grid above the planet, spinning slowly and emitting no detectable signals. They didn't match any known Terran design, nor were they alien. "Constructs," murmured one of the scientists, "not for war, for shielding, or synchronization." Then, without warning, all of the structures pulsed at once. A ripple passed. Between them, cascading downward through the atmosphere. The clouds shifted. The auroras flared unnaturally at the poles. And then the Earth itself, silent for weeks, responded. Across the galaxy, telescopes captured the moment. Earth's surface briefly shimmered, its oceans reflecting an unnatural spectrum of light. Something had activated beneath the surface. Whatever it wasn't meant to be hidden anymore. Toval's eyes widened. "They've built something underground. A planetary engine? A defense network?" Captain Kerr was silent for a moment. Then she gave the order. "Begin low-frequency scans, passive only, no deep probing." But before the scans could complete, the Lancer's Grace began to slow. Not from power loss. Its systems were functioning normally. Something was gently pushing against the ship. Not a weapon, not gravity, a field, an invisible current surrounding Earth, flowing outward like a protective sphere. The pilot checked the console. "We're being held, Captain. Like, placed in orbit. Not forced. Just stopped." The crew sat in silence, watching the blue-green planet below spin slowly on its axis. Earth wasn't rejecting them. It wasn't drawing them in either. It was simply choosing where they could go. Captain Kerr exhaled slowly. "Earth is awake." She sent a single message back to the Galactic Council. "Earth has not fallen. Earth has evolved. Awaiting instructions." Back in the observation lounge, Toval whispered to himself, "It is not silence. It's the breath before the first word." For now, Earth remained quiet, but the echoes were growing louder. Something was unfolding beneath the clouds, in orbit and beyond. And the galaxy, nervous, divided, and curious, would soon learn what humanity had been preparing for in the stillness. The planet rotated quietly beneath the orbiting vessel Lancers. Grace, serene from a distance, its continents masked by cloud systems too perfectly symmetrical to be natural. Earth appeared untouched, no visible war, no scars of disaster. But every sensor sweep told a different story. Captain Anya Kerr stared at the readings with a quiet intensity. "Surface biosigns are active," her science officer reported. "Not scattered, concentrated, below ground." The silence hadn't been absence, it had been redirection. A second diplomatic team, this one small and highly specialized, was dispatched to the surface in a shuttle fitted with passive tech and deep shielding. No weapons, no aggressive scans. Just a descent into what they hoped was a receptive world. Their destination was the region once known as the Pacific Northwest, now covered in a dome of cloud laced with atmospheric interference. As the shuttle entered the lower stratosphere, the instruments wavered, then went dead. All guidance systems failed and the shuttle began to glide, not crash. "Something's taking control," said the pilot. "We're not flying this anymore." The clouds parted just enough to reveal a single wide valley carved between towering evergreen-covered mountains. The shuttle drifted down with unnatural smoothness and touched down in a clearing surrounded by trees. As the landing gear settled onto soft soil, the hatch hissed open, not because someone inside triggered it, but because something outside allowed it. And waiting there were humans. Tall, alert, dressed in dark gray suits threaded with organic circuitry. Their faces bore calm expressions, and their eyes shimmered faintly with an inner light. "Welcome home," said one of them. The away team stepped out slowly. The air was clean, almost unnaturally so. Even the leaves rustled in patterns like the wind itself had been engineered. "Who are you?" Kerr's representative asked. The lead figure gestured to the surrounding forest. "We are Terrans," he said, "born of Earth, raised by necessity, evolved by design." "What happened to the cities?" "They are beneath," the man replied. "Where they are safe, where they can grow." They were led on foot toward a structure that had once been Seattle, now transformed into a descending spiral of biometallic towers built into the earth itself. Every wall pulsed faintly, alive with power but silent. There were no surveillance drones, no armed guards, no signs of paranoia. Only precision and purpose. The Terrans explained that years ago, long before Earth went dark, the governments of Earth had identified a distant threat, one they had chosen not to share with the wider galaxy, not out of arrogance, but because it was incomprehensible. It wasn't a fleet. It wasn't a species. It was a cosmic event with intelligence, something watching from outside conventional space. The signal arrived in pieces, the Terran guide explained. Faint patterns hidden in gravitational waves. They were not messages. They were observations. Measurements. Earth was being studied. While the rest of the galaxy advanced through trade and diplomacy, humanity turned inward. The surface cities were decommissioned and moved underground. A vast planetary shell was constructed, a layered defense system integrated with Earth's magnetic field, crust, and core. It had taken decades. And then, the moment Earth completed the system, the silence began. "We knew the act of finishing the network would trigger attention," said the guide. And it did. Captain Kerr looked around the chamber they had, entered. It was an observatory, facing not the stars, but Earth's inner core. There, a pulsing sphere hovered, its energy branching like veins through the city. "This is the core seed," the guide said. "It links every facility, every system, every Terran alive. We are not isolated. We are aligned." Humanity hadn't gone dark because it was afraid. It had gone dark because it had become something else, something deliberate, focused, and unified in a way the rest of the galaxy could barely comprehend. And now they were watching the stars again, because the silence had done its job. It had bought time. But time, as always, was running short. One of the Terrans turned toward Kerr's envoy with a calm expression. "It's coming," he said, "and soon the whole galaxy will hear it." The storm hadn't reached Earth yet, but it was moving, and this time Earth would not face it alone. It began at the edge of mapped space, far from Earth, far from anything. A science station orbiting an unstable neutron star sent its last report filled with fragmented images, blurry shadows moving across the star's corona, patterns of dark matter surging unnaturally, and an eerie silence that spread through nearby systems like a curtain being drawn. Then, no more transmissions. The station was gone. In the weeks that followed, other disappearances followed. A mining fleet near the Perseid Expanse, a communication hub floating above a peaceful colony, a deep space listening post monitoring the galactic edge. No wreckage, no explosions, only static. The pattern was unmistakable. Something was moving, but no one could see it directly. At the Galactic Council on Koravex, voices raised in panic and disbelief. Some blamed Earth, suggesting the planet's sudden silence and the appearance of its planetary defense field were connected to the new disappearances. Others pleaded for calm, insisting that Earth had only responded to a threat they all refused to acknowledge. In a secure chamber beneath Earth's surface, Captain Anya Kerr stood once again before the core seed. It pulsed with serene energy, like a heart beating beneath the planet's crust. Beside her, the Terran envoy, who now introduced himself simply as Elias, gestured to a wide, curved display. It showed nothing. Not a map, not ships, just darkness. "We call it the Veil," Elias said. "It's not made of matter. It moves through gravity and light. It observes before it acts. We saw its patterns years ago. We kept it secret because we had no way to stop it. We still don't. But we can delay it." Kerr narrowed her eyes. "Delay it from what?" Elias turned to her, his voice even. "From folding the outer edges of the galaxy into itself, from turning light into silence, from dismantling the laws we live by." Outside, Earth's skies remained calm, but in the upper atmosphere, the satellite prisms realigned again. Their silent rotations adjusted to new coordinates, not to scan, but to warn. For the first time in centuries, humanity was not trying to expand. It was trying to defend, not just itself, but the fragile balance of an entire galaxy that hadn't believed the danger was real. In orbit, the Lancer's Grace received a sudden surge of data, compressed, dense, and purposeful. It wasn't from Earth. It was from one of the colonies that had gone silent for weeks. The ship's crew gathered in the central hub as the decrypted images came through. The stars in the background were stretched, warped by gravitational forces that made no sense. In front of them, the colony station appeared transparent, not destroyed, just thin, as if space itself had peeled it away, layer by layer, leaving only an echo. There were no signs of weapons fire, no visible damage, just absence. Then the screen flickered again. A final frame, the silhouette of something massive, like an open hand reaching through the stars. No structure, no engine, just shape and motion, and the unmistakable sense of presence. Something had been watching the galaxy for a long time. It had tested systems on the edges, and now Earth believed it was preparing to move in fully, but Earth was no longer silent. It had been preparing not to escape, but to withstand. "Why didn't you warn the galaxy earlier?" Kerr asked Elias, her voice low. "We tried," he replied. "Years ago, no one listened. They laughed at the warnings, and some wanted to harness it." He paused, then continued, "We knew then what we know now. The only way to survive, it is to face it together. And if the galaxy won't believe the danger, they'll believe our response." Outside the mountain chamber, giant vertical structures extended from the earth like towers of light, quiet, beautiful, and humming with power. They weren't weapons, not yet, but they would be, because the enemy wasn't unseen anymore. It was, watching, measuring, and drawing closer, and soon, silence would be impossible. The silence around Earth broke not with noise but with motion. From deep beneath the planet's crust, hangars hidden for decades began to stir. The mountains shifted, seas briefly trembled, and from ancient fault lines now reinforced with engineered stone and energy latticework, humanity emerged. First came the Sentinel Orcs, vast triangular ships too large to ever have been launched from a surface facility. They rose slowly, silently, carried aloft by gravitational stabilizers far more advanced than anything the galaxy had seen. Each vessel shimmered with a reflective coating that adjusted to light, gravity, and even emotion. Above them, the orbital prisms realigned once again. This time, not to shield Earth, but to relay. Within seconds, the newly activated ships were networked into a synchronized command grid. They did not request access. They didn't hail. They simply knew. And so did the Terrans on board. The Lancer's Grace, still orbiting above, watched in awe as Earth's fleet expanded into space like the petals of a blooming flower. Hundreds of ships, not aggressive in form, not bristling with weapons, but built for speed, flexibility, and endurance. "They were never planning to hide forever," said Commander Toval, peering out of the observation deck. "They were planning to lead," Captain Kerr nodded. "And they waited until the galaxy had no choice but to follow." Across the stars, news spread quickly. Live streams of Earth's ships rising, transmitted via long-range relay drones, appeared on public channels from one side of the galaxy to the other. On planets where fear had taken root, hope returned. On battle-hardened worlds, old veterans straightened their backs. For decades, Earth had been seen as a memory. A birthplace, yes, but not a leader. Not anymore. Now they were something else. They were prepared. Back on the surface, Elias stood, with a gathering of Terran commanders near the planetary core interface. The core seed had expanded, now pulsing visibly above the crust, housed in a containment ring of energy and light. It wasn't just a power source. It was a communicator, tuned to quantum entanglements. It could speak to ships, to people, to systems spread across 100 light-years all at once. "This isn't about retaking lost ground," Elias said calmly. "This is about holding what still lives. If we wait for the veil to come to us, we will fall apart. We go to meet it, together." Terran diplomats, engineers, and commanders were dispatched on Earth's new ships, each one headed for a different sector of the galaxy, not to demand allegiance, but to offer support. The first response came from the Lurian Ascendancy, who had once doubted Earth's warnings. They sent a full cruiser escort to rendezvous with a Terran Ark on the edge of Sector J9. The Anrathi followed shortly after, and the Valorites soon after that. Each civilization brought their strengths: stealth technology, biological computing, interdimensional mapping. But it was Earth that provided the unifying platform, because Terran systems weren't designed to dominate. They were designed to connect. In the council chambers on Koravex, the debate finally ended. The vote passed with a rare unanimous decision. Earth would lead the defense coalition, not as conquerors, but as coordinators. The new name: the Unified Front of Sentience. By then, the enemy had already made its next move. The Kepler Verge went dark. 5 populated systems, stripped of light. No explosions, no distress calls, just stillness. When Terran scouts arrived, they found the remnants of cities turned to fine dust, undamaged but hollow. Life had been removed, not destroyed, and that, more than anything, told them the nature of the threat. It doesn't want territory, Elias explained. It wants silence, absence, a galaxy without consciousness. But Earth, and the rising alliance around it, refused to disappear quietly. New Terran vessels deployed relay towers across allied worlds. These towers weren't weapons. They were beacons, designed to keep communication open, keep the fabric of awareness strong. Each one pulsed with a rhythm that echoed the Earth's core, deliberate, unified, alive. As Earth's ships moved into deeper space, the silence behind them faded, and ahead, just beyond the dark curtain of unknown space, the enemy finally stirred, aware, now that Earth was not hiding anymore. Humanity was rising, and it would rise with the galaxy or not at all. The first true confrontation did not happen at the edge of known space. It happened in the skies above Thalen Prime. A thriving colony world in the Galden Belt, Thalen was known for its shimmering oceans and glass-like forests, an outpost of peace. Until one quiet night, when its skies cracked open, the stars blinked, then vanished. Not behind clouds or cosmic dust, but behind something darker, something that absorbed not just light, but thought. Comms failed. AI systems shut down. Gravity wavered. In orbit, an early warning buoy fired a desperate signal just before it went offline. They are here. Earth responded immediately. 2 Sentinel Orcs, already stationed near the border, folded through hyperspace. With them came ships from the Lurian, Anrathi, and the newly joined Tarsari Combine. It was the first deployment of the Unified Front, of Sentience. Their destination was a battlefield not yet shaped, only sensed. As the fleet emerged from fold space, they were met with darkness. Not the void of space, but something deeper. Space itself felt dimmed, and then the enemy revealed itself. It did not arrive with fire or sound. It came in shifting geometry, fractals of shadow that moved like liquid intelligence, shapes that bent light, altered gravitational fields, and seemed to unravel physics simply by existing. "They're not ships," murmured a Lurian commander. "They're decisions made manifest." The lead Terran vessel, TNS Resolute Dawn, opened its shields and broadcast a simple message across every known frequency. "We are awake. We are unified. We do not consent to silence." The shadow entities responded by folding space around them, attempting to erase the Terran fleet from continuity. But Earth had built for this. The core seed's signal extended through each vessel, tethering them to real space in a way the enemy had not anticipated. Weapons activated, not missiles or lasers, but harmonic disruptors tuned to destabilize the very patterns the entities used to exist. Energy grids pulsed with thought-directed interfaces, guided by synced crews and predictive AI cores. The battle had no sound, but it shook the system. The first wave hit the Terran vanguard with force enough to rupture mountains, had they been on a planet. Ships folded, then reformed. Light bent, but they held, because they were anchored not just to one another, but to Earth. Humanity had learned, in its long silence, how to adapt faster than fear. The Anrathi stealth vessels cloaked, themselves in subdimensional waves, slicing through the shadow constructs like scalpels. Lurian cruisers absorbed impact and rerouted gravitational tension, using it as fuel. And behind it all, Earth's command ships orchestrated the chaos with clarity. What had once been silence was now signal, unified and unyielding. The battle lasted exactly 7 minutes. Then, the enemy retreated, not destroyed, but deterred, not defeated, but disrupted. And in its wake, something remarkable happened. The stars over Thalen Prime returned. The forests glowed again with bioluminescent light. The oceans rippled with undisturbed beauty, and for the first time since Earth's silence began, the galaxy could breathe again. Back aboard the Resolute Dawn, Captain Kerr stood with Elias and Commander Toval, watching the system stabilize. "They expected to catch us scattered," she said. "They always do," Elias replied. "That's how the veil moves, by isolating thought, fragmenting unity." Toval nodded. "And now they know. Humanity is not alone, not anymore." But the victory was not without cost. 3 Allied ships were lost. 1 Terran Ark returned damaged, its crew rescued in the last moments before collapse. And in deep orbit, a probe caught a final flicker of something massive shifting, retreating, not out of fear but in calculation. The enemy had seen Earth's hand. Now it would prepare another. The unified front knew this was just the beginning. In a council transmission days later, representatives from over 20 civilizations gathered, some that had never spoken directly before. They did not argue. They did not debate. Instead, they signed the Aurora Accords, pledging full resource and intelligence sharing for planetary defense. Humanity had not become the galaxy's protector. It had become its reminder that the light must not fade, that silence is not peace, and that some storms must be met together. The battle above Thalen Prime changed everything. Across the galaxy, systems that had once operated in isolation began opening their channels. Forgotten alliances rekindled. Ancient distrust, long buried under trade disputes and cultural barriers, began to dissolve beneath a single truth. No species could stand alone against what was coming. Earth had not just risen. It had awakened something older than fear. A will to resist not for conquest, but for continuity. And yet, even after the first major confrontation, the enemy, the Veil, did not return immediately. The galaxy braced for another strike, but none came. It was as if the darkness itself had paused. On Earth, beneath the shell of planetary defense fields and carefully tuned energy grids, the core seed pulsed slower now. Not weakened, focused. Resting between movements, like the calm breath of a predator before it steps forward. In a command chamber buried deep under what had once been the Himalayas, Captain Anya Kerr stood with Elias and representatives from the unified front. A new generation of leaders, bonded by a war still in motion. The Veil didn't retreat because it was afraid, Kerr said. It retreated because it's calculating its next move. Elias nodded. And so must we. Maps of interstellar space stretched across the display wall. Sectors where the Veil had thinned reality were marked in pale blue. Sectors reinforced by new Alliance beacons pulsed in white. Already, Terran engineers had assisted in constructing 9 planetary-scale harmonic barriers, and 12 more were underway. The galaxy was no longer reacting, it was preparing. What puzzled many, however, was the pause. Why had the enemy not pressed its advantage? Why had it allowed the unified front to grow, to coordinate, to fortify? The answer came unexpectedly. A fleet of unknown origin appeared just beyond the outer cleft, a void of space considered untraversable by most civilizations. The ships were not Veil constructs, nor were they of any known race. They were human. A colony ship, its hull weathered by centuries, drifted forward and hailed the Earth command net. "This is the Ember of Sol." We never stopped watching. Inside the massive vessel were tens of thousands of descendants from a lost human expedition, presumed vanished during Earth's pre-silence era. They had escaped into deep space to avoid the coming threat, watching from beyond known space as Earth grew silent and the galaxy turned its back. Now they returned, not to reclaim anything, but to add their strength to it. They brought knowledge, fragments of data on the Veil, behavioral patterns, non-linear movements, dimensional bends, and more importantly, a simple message. The Veil learns, it adapts, but it does not create. We do. That idea spread faster than any broadcast. The enemy was vast, powerful, but it lacked imagination. It did not innovate. It only erased. And that, the unified front realized, was their greatest weapon, creation. Across the galaxy, music returned to public squares. Art was painted on station walls. Stories were told again in every language and dialect, across every medium. Even the smallest outposts began broadcasting, not for defense, but for defiance. The light was not just technological, it was cultural. Earth, having once gone silent to prepare, now became the loudest voice in the galaxy. But it spoke not with threats, not with demands, but with clarity. We are still here. We are many. We remember. And we build. In time, the Veil returned, but differently. Not with overwhelming force, but with caution. The next confrontation was not a battle, but a test. A probe into an outpost now defended not by guns, but by thousands of harmonized satellites echoing one single, human-composed melody. The probe faded before it could complete its approach. It had learned, and it would continue to learn. But so would humanity. And now, it would not do so alone. Earth's silence had been a cocoon. What emerged from it was not just a defense network or a stronger fleet. It was a reminder that in the face of unknowable darkness, sometimes the most powerful message is not the roar of war, but the quiet that follows, the quiet of unity, the quiet of rebuilding, the quiet of resolve, and just beyond that quiet, always, humanity stood ready to speak again. The end